We're going to kick off this edition of the Vancouver Power BI Modern Excel User Group Meetup for Thursday, September 5th. Is that really the day it is? Holy cow, how did it get to be September already? So welcome, everyone. And today we've got Mike Thomas is going to be joining us to do our our presentation here on cube functions. But before we get into that, we're just going to do our normal of thanking the sponsors here. So the first sponsor that I'd like to thank is obviously SkillWave. This is the training company that I run with my partner, Matt Allington, where we teach you how to be awesome at Excel and Power BI. That is a division of Excel Guru, which also happens to be the company that develops and ships the Monkey Tools add-in, which will help you build better data models faster in Excel. Honestly, it'll actually just help you do things faster in Excel. It's not even all specifically around data models. Our next meetups that we have coming up, our next Power BI and Excel track that is coming up in a couple of weeks. We are looking forward to having Melissa DeCorte come back to visit us again, who's going to be talking about mastering nested transformations inside Power Query. If you've seen Melissa before, you know she's absolutely brilliant. So this is going to be a fantastic session. Be aware that Melissa is joining us from the Netherlands, so we will be running this at a 12 p.m. Pacific time as the start time. Again, if you do go and RSVP for the meetup, you'll get the invitation for when that is. Our next Excel track, I will actually be running this one on Thursday, October 10th. We'll be doing this at the normal 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to talk a little about exploring Monkey Tools. I'll show you some of the features that are in here. So if you haven't seen this, I'd highly encourage you to come and see this. There's a lot of free features that are built into Monkey Tools that will make you more efficient, as well as some killer pro features as well. If you haven't seen this, you should definitely check it out. Even if you have seen our stuff on Monkey Tools, I'd encourage you to come back again, because you know what? There's always new stuff, and that's the kind of stuff I'll be talking about. So that'll be the next session there. So let me just quickly go and mute that. There we go. Oh, the Monkey Tools videos are great. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's awesome. If you are interested, there is a free course on using Monkey Tools at SkillWave. You can register at the link that we see here. It gives you lifetime access to the videos. You get access to the downloadable versions. So there is a version of some of these videos on YouTube, but in here we actually provide you with the example files, and this is the course that I'll be keeping up to date as Monkey Tools evolves and changes and expands over its lifetime. I lost my mouse on here. Let's not do that. There we go. That's better. There we go. What's new in Monkey Tools? The last release for Monkey Tools is actually from August 6th. I haven't done a ton of new stuff, only because I've been working on other things for the meantime. But our latest updates, the BiblioMonkey, is now allowing you to do replacements. So when you store your formulas or your queries in BiblioMonkey, when you actually go to inject those into a new workbook, it can actually prompt you now for Excel tables, Excel columns. We have a new refresh button. So if you're making changes in Excel while you have BiblioMonkey open, you can update things there. And we've also allowed some special characters in the descriptions as well, so that they don't blow that up as well. We have some import monkey updates, did a complete refactoring of this last time around. So now when you import your files, a data model or Power Queries from a Power BI file, or when you import your Excel models from a Monkey Tools backup, if we cannot access the data source, it will now load those as empty tables. It used to error out on this. We've now got that fixed. So that's the cool thing, plus a bunch of bug fixes. There'll be more of those coming as always. And you can also, of course, find out about all the different features in that free video course. All right, let me just go and mute that. There we go. All right. The next semester of my Excel Fundamentals Academy at SkillWave is kicking off on September 11th. This is a fantastic program if you've got yourself or someone else in your organization that you want to get better with Excel. We start with basic reviews of formulas. We talk about tables, pivot tables, data visualization, and Power Query. This is sort of the course to get you set up to take the next stage of more advanced business intelligence, but it's a great course for filling in knowledge gaps and whatnot. So if you or someone else in your organization feels that they would benefit from filling in those knowledge gaps, a great program. It has access to all of my Ask Ken Anything sessions as well, which means that you can get help with your data for your organization along the way. Also on September 11th, we're kicking off the next semester of our Self-Service BI Academy. We've just added some new practice labs and quizzes into this as well. And I need to update the number of hours of credit you get, because that's actually increased based on the new material that we put in. This is my premier training program. We start with a little bit of a Power Query and pivot table review. We go through and teach you about dimensional modeling and DAX, how to use, good DAX measures to build some good intelligence. We look at Power BI. There's all kinds of stuff in here. As Mike and I were talking about just before the program aired here, we had a great Ask Ken Anything session yesterday where I was helping one of our attendees with a very tricky dual pivot table solution to try and keep them in sync. Some really cool stuff that's kind of mind-opening here. Includes my books, recipe cards, my software, all kinds of good stuff here. If you're interested in a truly awesome training program, you should definitely check this out. This meetup, along with every meetup that we run for the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group, is recorded and will be posted on the SkillWave Training YouTube channel. It typically takes me 24 to 48 hours to get these produced and uploaded. If you have RSVP'd to the meetup site, at that point in time, you will get a notification that it is available. So be patient, it's coming, but be aware that, you know, once you're looking back at this and you see some of the cool things Mike's doing and you're thinking, I need to go back and rewatch that again, the video will be coming for that. The last thing that I want to say here is that if you would like to come and speak to our user group, we'd love to have you. Please fill out the survey here. All of these links, by the way, are in the PDF that are already uploaded on the Meetup site, so you can grab them there to make it really, really easy to get into them. Just fill out the short survey. We'll get in touch with you, and we'll get you on our program. We love having new speakers who are willing to show us anything about how they work with Excel or anything in the Power Platform space. And now, it's my great pleasure to welcome Mike Thomas to our program. Mike, thanks for joining us here. I'm looking forward to seeing what you got on cube functions here. The floor is yours, my friend. Want to take it away?
Great, thank you. Yeah, let me share my screen. I'm also going to have the chat open on my other screen.
Excellent.
So hopefully I won't miss anything, but if I do, if you want to keep your eye on the chat as well, Ken, that would be good. But
we'll just definitely do that.
Eye on it.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go on.
I'm just going to say I can see your screen. You were good to go.
Excellent. Okay. I've not got any slides, so I'm going to do a very quick introduction of myself and then go straight into Cube functions. So I've worked in IT training for about 35 years. I focused on Excel and Power BI for the past 10 to 12 years. Until last week, I was an in-house trainer working for AstraZeneca. I've now left that job and I've decided to set up on my own as a freelance trainer. And in January this year, I became an Excel MVP. So I think that's enough about me. You're here not to hear my life history, but to learn about Cube functions. Okay. To understand Cube functions, you need to be familiar with two things: the data model and DAX measures. Now, I've delivered this session a few times for various different meetup groups, and I find that not everybody is familiar with these. So I'm just going to do a very quick overview. So I'm actually going to start by opening up this file here. And let's start with the data model. So traditionally, when you've got the set of data, you store that data in a range or a table in the spreadsheet grid. And then we do things with that data. We might summarize a column of numbers with a formula. We might add another column. We might create pivot tables from it. But particularly when you're building pivot tables, there are limitations of storing that data in the worksheet grid, particularly, as I said, around pivot tables. I'm not going to go into those limitations, but there are definitely limitations. And that's where the data model comes in. People say to me, what is the data model? Think of the data model as a container inside an Excel file, and the purpose of that container is to store your tables of data. And if you store the data inside the data model, you get around those limitations that I mentioned before. Now, to access the data model, you go to Data, you go to Data Model, and you go to Manage Data Model. Although if you've got a slightly older version of Excel, it's Data Model or Data Manage Data Model. They've for some reason, Microsoft have recently changed this menu and also added 3D map on there. So I'm going to go into Manage Data Model. And that opens up the data model window, also known as the Power Pivot window. The first time that you do that, by the way, it asks you to enable an add-in, and that add-in is Power Pivot. I just got booted out of Teams. I am back.
Welcome back. now I see two of you. That's weird.
Right.
And yet your screen is still shared, but
I'm going to turn my camera. I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm going to make sure my screen is shared. I'm going to go back to making sure I can see the chat. Can you still see my screen, Ken?
Can see it again, yeah. So I'm looking at the Excel spreadsheet, not the Power Pivot window.
That's great. Yeah. For some reason, it seems to have closed Power Pivot down. So let me reopen it. There we go. Okay, I've turned my camera off just to save a little bit of bandwidth. I don't know what happened there, but where was I up to? Yeah. What I've done is I've gone into Power Pivot. So I've basically gone to Data and then Data Model, Manage Data Model, and that has opened up Power Pivot. By the way, if you don't know how to get data into the data model, that's not a topic that I'm going to cover today. And the other thing to mention is if anybody's using Excel on a Mac, you can use cube functions, but because Excel for Mac doesn't support the data model, there are limitations. Okay, so this is the data model for this particular file. There is one table of data in it. It's called sales YTD, sales year to date, and there's 1,000 rows of data in it. I'm just also going to make sure I can see the chat. There we go. Okay, so yeah, that's the data model. For anybody who's not familiar with the data model, I'll just summarize that. It's basically a container that lives inside an Excel file that is used to store data instead of storing the data in the spreadsheet grid. And there's a bunch of advantages of storing the data in the data model rather than the spreadsheet grid. The other thing you need to understand is DAX measures. And I noticed that somebody mentioned DAX earlier on in the chat, but again, not everybody, in my experience, not everybody knows what DAX is. So very, very quickly, DAX is a language that was developed by Microsoft, I think way back in 2007, and it's used to create formulas that perform calculations on the data in the data model. A measure is actually a type of formula written in DAX, and measures typically generate a single value, such as a sum or a count. Now, this session isn't going to be a deep dive on DAX, but I will be writing some fairly simple DAX measures. So having an understanding of what it is and seeing how it works will help you. Okay, so that brings us on to cube functions. Don't forget, if you want to put questions in the chat as we go or comments, that is absolutely fine. I'm keeping my eye on that as we go. So cube functions. Cube functions are actually Excel worksheet functions. They're not DAX, they're worksheet functions, and they're used to pull data from the data model into the worksheet cells. There's actually 7 different cube functions. I'm not going to go over all of them today, but I'll be going over the important ones. Okay, so this spreadsheet here, I've just closed down the data model window. This spreadsheet is a simple sales dashboard for a company, a made-up company called Excellent Ice Cream. It's a US-based company. They make and sell ice cream. And in column B, I need to enter some values. Now, the data's in the data model. We know that, just seen it. And because the data's in the data model, I can't use standard Excel functions. So, for example, I can't go to here and just use the sum function to generate the total revenue. Can't do that because the data's in the data model. So one option you've got is to create a pivot table from the data in the data model, which I've already done. So there's a pivot table, just a standard pivot table. And all I did there was say insert pivot table from data model, and then built the pivot table up in the usual way. And once I've got the pivot table, I can go back to my stats sheet, go to B6, type in equals, and then pick up that figure there. And you'll notice again, somebody typed in, somebody mentioned get pivot data in the chat earlier. Get pivot data allows you to grab the contents of a cell that's in a pivot table. So there is our total revenue, and then I'd have to format that as currency. If I want the number of orders, again, I can go to here, just pick up that figure there. Okay. But that's one way of doing it, and there's actually nothing wrong with doing it that way. But creating the pivot table adds extra work, and it also requires refreshing, should I say, every time the data model is updated. And we've got a problem with this one here. What this one here is, if I go into the data model, and I'm going to do Power Pivot Manage this time, it's just one click less. What we've got here in our data is every sales transaction has a product type, and it's either going to be premium or standard. And I think from memory, it's premium if the flavor of the ice cream is toffee or chocolate. Other than that, it is standard. So what I want to do is I want to show in here the total revenue from premium. And that would involve going and creating another pivot table. So I'll just do that quickly. Insert pivot table from data model. Click OK to put the pivot table there. I'm going to drag revenue into values. And I'm going to drag product type into filters, and then I'm going to set that to premium. Click OK. So you're ending up having to create another pivot table, and then from here, I can pick up that figure there. So that's how I can get the revenue from premium. But, you know, imagine that the filter I'd added had been something like order date, and then I need to go through and I need to literally untick only the dates I'm interested in. So if I was interested in just looking at the, I don't know, the first 2 weeks in January, I'd have to untick anything that wasn't in those first 2 weeks in January, which makes setting up your filter relatively slow and relatively cumbersome. So it's not ideal. It works, but it's not ideal. Okay, so what I am going to do is show you an alternative way of getting these numbers into here. There's nothing wrong with doing it the way I've just done it. I proved it works, but I don't think it's the best way to do that. Okay, I'm just having a look at a question, not directly related to today's topic. If one's learning M and DAX and is constructing data models, why would they spend a lot of time in Power Pivot? Why not just focus on Power BI? I will come back to that later, or maybe other people will put their experiences and reasoning behind that in the chat. I can see actually that Ken's done that. So I will continue whilst people may want to put something in the chat around that. Okay, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to delete those. Can actually delete these pivot tables. So yeah, I don't need the pivot tables, so I'll get rid of them. I am leaving that there because I want to copy and paste it later. It's quite a long formula, which I don't really want to sit and type for the demo. Okay, now the cube value functions use measures as one of their parameters. So before we look at cube value, which is the first cube function that I'll show you, we're going to create some measures. So there's a couple of ways you can create a measure. You can go to Power Pivot, you can go to Measures, and you can go to New Measure. That's the way I usually do it. Then give the measure a name. So I'm going to call this measure Total Revenue. You can call your measures anything you like. Remember what a measure is. It's basically a summary of a set of numbers or a set of values. So it's going to create a total, it's going to create an average, it's going to create a count, something like that. So you can call your measures anything you like. You can have spaces in them. I normally make sure my measures have logical names. And then I'm going to click into the formula box. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can actually see what I'm doing. And because this measure is going to add up the revenue from the revenue column in the data model, I'm just going to use the good old sum function, which, yes, is an Excel function, but it's also been ported across to DAX. So sum open brackets, and then I'm going to type the letter R of revenue, and I get 2 entries. Always pick the one that's got the table name with it. So that way, if there's any confusion, if you've got 2 columns because you've got 2 tables in the data model and you've got two columns with the same name, Excel can be absolutely certain which ones you're referring to. So I'm going to just double click on it from that list, close the brackets, and enter. So I've created a measure. I'm going to create another measure. So go back to Power Pivot, Measures, New Measure. I'm going to call this measure Number of Orders. And for the formula is actually just going to count the number of rows in the table. So I can use the DAX function count rows. And all I need to do there is specify the name of the table, which is sales YTD. By the way, if anybody feels I'm going a little bit too fast for them, let me know in the chat. Happy to slow down. Just, when you've got a fairly large group of people, you never know what sort of level everyone's at. Or if you feel that I'm going at the right level, just let me know in the chat. That's absolutely fine. But that is the measure. So click OK there, and that's created a second measure. And there's one more measure that I'm going to create. And this measure is going to calculate the revenue just from sales of premium. So this one, go back to Measures, New Measure. I'm going to call, where's my notes? I'll just call this measure Premium Value or Premium Revenue. Premium Revenue, there we go. Now for this one, I'm going to use the calculate function. If anyone's not familiar with the DAX calculate function, it allows you to create a total, an average, etc., but with some filter, some criteria in there. So this one I could put the sum of the revenue, but seeing as I've already got another measure that's doing that, rather than repeating myself, I can actually just use the name of that measure, which is total revenue, then put a comma, and then put the actual criteria, which is product type equals premium. All right, so that is the DAX code to calculate the total revenue where product type is premium, and click OK. So I've got 3 measures. If you actually want to see the values of those measures right now, if you go to the data model, Power Pivot Manage, down here in this kind of lower section of the Power Pivot window, as long as you've got the show calculation area switched on, what you can see is you can see the names of all the measures and their current values. Okay, so you can resize this window. If you've got a lot of measures, you can make it smaller. You can also widen that column. So although it looks like those measures are associated with the order date, they're not. It's just the way they're displayed. They're always displayed in the first column there. So we've got the names of the measures and the current values. If you need to change the measures, edit the code, you can go to Measures, Manage Measures, and you can edit the measures from here. So change the name. You can also create new ones from here and delete any measures. But those measures only exist in this file. Okay, you feel writing measures in data model interface is more intuitive. Yeah, it's just personal choice, I think, and I do it in both. Okay, so yeah, you can just go to Power Pivot Manage, and you can actually just directly write the code up there. Okay, so Now we come to the actual cube value function, which is one of these. As I said before, there's seven cube functions, and cube value is one of them. What cube value does is it allows you to grab, or it generates the result of a measure and puts that result into a cell. So I want to put in here the value of the measure called total revenue. So I put equals cube value, open brackets. The first argument is the name of the connection. And this is always going to be the same. In double quotes, it's this workbook data model. And the nice thing is it prompts you. So I can just double click on that and close double quotes. Then I put a comma. And the second argument is the name of the measure. So again, in double quotes, when you type the double quotes, this autocomplete pops up. I can double click on measures, type a dot, and it pops up with a list of measures. It pops up with some other items as well, but we're interested in this one here, measures total revenue. Close the double quotes, close the brackets, and enter. And there we go. Now, if I had applied formatting to that measure, which I can do from here, so I can manage measures, I can choose that measure and edit it. So if I'd done this at the start, which I totally forgot to do, and I'll just use UK, no decimal places to save time, but you've got all the different currency symbols there, then it automatically applies formatting there, or I could have just applied formatting in the normal way. To get the number of orders, then I can put equals cube value and then do the same thing, this workbook data model, comma, and then open double quotes again, select measures from here by double clicking it, dot, and that one was number of orders. Close double quotes, close brackets. I'll just leave that up there for a second in case people are scribbling anything down. So it's equals cube value, and then it's this workbook data model in double quotes as the first argument, and then measures dot name of measure in double quotes in the second argument. And then I'll just do the third one, which is going to be virtually the same. So equals cube value, open double quotes, this workbook data model, close double quotes, comma, and then the name of the measure. So it's measures dot, and I called it premium revenue. There we go. Okay. Now, if the data model gets updated, then all you need to do, well, if the data model gets updated, which you have to do by doing a refresh, as soon as the data model gets updated, those update automatically. Okay, does the indirect formula work within cube functions? I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know, Andrew. I've never tried it. I think one of my demos, is that using, let me just check my notes. No, that was using a different function. I honestly don't know. If anyone else knows, if Ken knows or anyone else knows, please feel free to answer that. Okay. Do we have any other questions, any other comments on that? Now, the next thing I'm going to do in A4 is I'm going to show the period that this report is for. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically say reporting period, which is from this date to that date. And what I want to do is I actually want to pick up the earliest date from here and the latest date. So I actually need a couple more measures. So I'll just go to create a new measure, and I'll call this measure period start. And the formula is going to be min open bracket, and I want to use the order date column, which is that one there. And that's all I need to do, but I want to format it, not as currency, but as date. And I wanted to use a day, month, year format. There we go. That one will do. Okay. So the min function, just like the min function in Excel, it is going to pick up the lowest date, the earliest date from that column. So I'll actually just copy that. And there's a reason of copying, because I'm going to do the highest and then create another measure. And I'll call this one period end. That one is going to be equals max. Okay, so what that's doing is that is going to pick up the latest date. So it's going to go through that column. It's going to pick up, one's going to pick up the earliest date, the other's going to pick up the latest date. And if we want to see those, see their current values, there we go, 1st of January 22, 16th of May 22. So what I can then do, and this is this really long formula, which I'm just going to copy and paste. I don't want to waste time typing it. But that one, yeah, what that formula is doing is actually got a cube value function inside a text function. So it is taking the date that's generated from the period start measure, and it's formatting that as text with that format. It's joining that to the word to, and then it's doing a similar thing with the end date. So again, I'll just leave that up there for a second in case anybody's sort of making notes or anything. But you will get copies of these files. So there we go. That is that's how you can have like a heading for the date periods. And then if you did a refresh and the data in the data model updated, then that would update as well. All right. Do we have any other questions on that? Feeling nostalgic, remembering the days before Power BI. Okay. You've not used Q value before, but you can see all kinds of possibilities. Excellent. That is, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm showing it to you, so that you can get some ideas of the sort of reports you can do. Okay, so hopefully everybody is okay with that. That was just I would say that was a relatively simple example of how to use the cube value function. So we did a quick recap of the data model, a recap, or maybe it was new to some people, of creating measures, and then how we can basically grab the values of those measures and put them into cells in the spreadsheet using the cube value function, and how we can combine the cube value function with other functions. In this case, I've just used the text function. Okay, what we got there. Cube value is great if you want it to be dynamic. You like using cube member with slices. Yeah, that's actually one of my demos. Okay. So I'm going to save this file. So yeah, it's a good one there. Who's bought that? Reen. All right, so let's close this one down. And let's go on and have a look at another example of what you can do with cube functions. So I'm going to go into cube functions 2. I've used the same data, but this report is going to show total revenue for a specific country. What I want to do in B4 is I want to have a drop down which will contain the country names. Where are the country names coming from? They're coming from the country sold to column in the data model. So there's about, I think there's 8 country names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this note sheet here. I'm going to go to A1 and I'm going to use another cube function called the cube set function. Cube set, there we go. Okay, so what does CubeSet do? CubeSet retrieves a list of all the items in a specified column and stores them in a single cell. So I guess in a way it is similar to an array, like dynamic array stores all the values in a single cell, but then spills down. So it's not exactly like a dynamic array, but I'm trying to relate it to something everybody's, I'm sure, familiar with. Okay, so the only thing is that when you load the set of values into the cell, you can't actually see the items in the cell, as you'll see in a minute. All right, so equals CubeSet, open brackets. The first argument, again, is this workbook data model in double quotes, comma, and then the second argument is where the data is that you want it to grab. So in this case, it's coming from the country sold to column in the data model. So that's going to be open double quotes. I'm not using a measure this time. So I want to select the name of the table, then a dot, and then the name of the column. Then another dot, and then I don't want to select all. I want to type the word members. This is one of those little quirks, shall we say, of Excel, that when you press the dot, it doesn't always generate the full list of items. You know, if anyone's familiar with VBA, I'm sure you'll be familiar with that that little quirk in the VBA editor in various instances. But yeah, you need to type dot and then you need to manually type the word members. So what you're saying is stick into A1 all the values from that column in the data model. So close the brackets and enter. And just click on OK. Now, I can just leave A1 blank, but the thing about leaving A1 blank is people might think that is a blank cell because, you know, not everybody looks up at the formula bar and you could easily get somebody overwriting what's in that cell. So rather than leaving A1 blank, I can add what's called a caption. And the caption is basically a word, a phrase, anything you like, whatever you set will be displayed in the cell. So I'm going to edit that formula, stick a comma after that second argument, and you can see the third argument, which is optional, is a caption. If it's text, as you'd expect, it needs to go in double quotes. So I'm going to stick the word countries in there, but it can be absolutely anything. So what you're now doing is you're now telling it what to display in that cell, but behind the scenes in A1, you actually have a list of countries, which is picked up from the country column in the table in the data model. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to A2 and I'm going to put a formula in there to count how many values there are in the in the CubeSet. So that is using the function CubeSet count. So equals CubeSet count, open brackets, A1. So remember, behind the scenes in A1, there is a CubeSet, and CubeSet count will tell us that there are 9 values. Why I've done that will become clear in a minute. Then I'm going to go over to B1 and I'm going to use the sequence function because I want to generate a list of sequential numbers. And what I want to do is I want to generate basically a list of 9 numbers like that. So I've told it to generate a set of values starting at 1, going up in steps of 1 and stopping at whatever's in there. What I could have done is, instead of doing that, I could have actually put equals sequence, open brackets, CubeSet count, A1, close brackets. and that will give me the same thing. And that way I don't actually need that figure there. But the reason I'm generating that will become clear in a minute. All right, so what I've done is I've just generated a set of sequential numbers, and the number of numbers is determined by the number of items in the cube set. The next thing I want to do is I want to use another cube function, which is called cube ranked member. So for this one, I'll go over to C1 and I'll put equals cube ranked member. And what cube ranked member does is it returns an item from a specific position within the cube set. So again, I need to put in the connection, which is this workbook data model in double quotes. Then I need to put the location of the cube set, which is A1. And then I need to put in the position number. So for the first item is going to be 1, for the next item is going to be 2, next item is going to be 3, etc. So I can actually just put B1 hash. Because what B1 hash does, with B1 being a dynamic array, what you're doing there is you're telling it to use the whole of the dynamic array. I'm sure most people know that if you stick a hash sign after a cell reference, where the cell reference is the starting cell of a dynamic array, it references the entire array. Close the bracket. I do need to make A1 absolute, so I'll just do that. And what it's done is it's generated a list of the values from the array. So all it's basically done is it's gone to the cube set that's in A1, and it's grabbed all the values, including all, which references all the items, and it's just listed them down there. So that is the first item in the cube set. That's the second item. That's the third item. It's using that as a positional value, if you like. Okay. We have any questions? Yeah, it is. It is. It's a virtual table. If that's it's if that's what you're talking about there. Okay. Oh, cube is a new thing on your learning list. Excellent. All right. So the reason that I've done that is because, as I said, I want to create a drop-down list, and I want to create the drop-down list from the values that are in that column in the data model. So if I then go back to the stat sheet, I go back to B4, and I just put, I don't put equals at all. I go to data, data validation, set that to list, and then the source is going to be notes C1 hash. Okay, because that is also a dynamic array. So all I'm doing is I'm just specifying the first cell of that array there. And that has created my drop-down list. Okay, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to ask. So if you add a country, does the dynamic array and associated info update? Yes, it does. What you do is we'll assume, we'll imagine that this data has been loaded into the data model, say from a CSV file or a database or a whatever, doesn't really matter. But yeah, if you did a refresh because the data in, let's say, the CSV had changed, then that would update the data model, and that would just dynamically update all of this lot, which would then dynamically update that. So yes, is the answer to that. Okay, so I'll just do a quick recap there, because a lot of people are saying they like that stuff. So yeah, so what I did in there is I used the cube set function, which grabs the values of whatever column I specify there. Remember to put the word members.members at the end. You'll have to manually type that, and then that is the caption. Okay, you do. I think somebody asked in the chat before or mentioned sorting, you do have an option to specify the sort order, but I didn't do that, and it's defaulted to alphabetical. But yeah, if you wanted to have a different order, you could do. So if you wanted to have this list sorted by revenue or something like that, you could do that. So that creates the cube set, which is the actual values that are sitting in the background of A1. Then I created a list of numbers, and the only reason I created that list of numbers is because the cube ranked member function needs them. So that was the cube ranked member, which basically says use the data in the data model, use the set of values in the cube set that's in A1, and then generate the list based on the number in column B. And once I'd done that and I got my list, it was then a simple case of using data validation in the normal way to create the dropdown. Okay. I understand that ranking is based on an actual number of instances of the country. How about you rank it on a different column, namely value of transaction in that country? I think to do that, you then have to probably do the sort order here. So what have we got? Would this work if I did, let's say, sort descending, and I said sort by sales year to date dot, let's say, revenue. I've not done this before, so I'm just trying it out. No, that seems to have generated the same order by the look of it. I'd have to think about that one a little bit, but yeah, I'm sure that could be done. Are you able to nest these into a let formula? I've not done that. Andrew, but I don't see why you couldn't. I don't see why there's a reason you couldn't do that, because after all, CubeSet is just a normal function at the end of the day. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do here is I want to calculate the revenue for whichever country is selected here. All right, so I'm going to use equals cube value, open brackets. Again, I'm going to say this workbook data model, comma. I want it to calculate the total revenue. Now I've got a measure for that. Or have I got a measure for that? Because this is a different file. I just realized I haven't got a measure. So let me create a measure. Let me create a measure called total revenue. And the measure is going to be the sum of the revenue. Okay, so let's go back and do that again. So equals cube value, this workbook data model, and then I need to supply the measure, which is the one I've just created. So that would be open quotes measures dot total revenue, close double quotes, and then I need another argument or expression, as they call it, and this is going to be the criteria. So comma, and in double quotes, this is going to be sales YTD dot country sold to dot open square brackets, close double quotes, ampersand B4, ampersand, and then close square bracket in double quotes, followed by close normal bracket. So you can, in the cube value function, you can have multiple expressions, as they call them. So the first expression is the actual measure, and the second expression is a string, which is basically defining the criteria. So it's basically saying where the country sold to in that table equals what's in B4. So as I change the country name, you can see that it's changing the revenue. And if I set that to all, then that is the total revenue. Okay, can the cube value work with filtering on either country 1 or country 2 without creating cube value cells and summing them? I've not done that. The way I've done it is to do a sum, which I'm going to show you in the next demo. So that's something that I will go away and play with. There's a lot of good questions coming in here, and some stuff for me to take away and have a play with, because it is a massive subject. Okay, do we have any other questions on that? Don't see any. Okay, so for my third and final demo, I'm going to show you using cube functions with a slicer. So cube functions 3. Okay, so what I've done here is the same data, same setup, but I'm going to use a slicer instead of a drop down. So if I just pick a random cell and then go to insert slicer, just click OK there, choose data model, choose the table in the data model and click open. It then gives me a list of all of the column names from sales YTD. So I'm going to choose country sold to and click OK. So there is my slicer. I'll just stick my slicer somewhere. With the slicer selected, if I go to the slicer tab and go to slicer settings, then I'm not going to go through everything on here, but see this one here that says name to use in formulas, slicer underscore country sold to. Okay, so if we need to reference this slicer in a formula, which we do, we reference it with slicer underscore country sold to. Then I'm going to go over to the note sheet. I'm going to go to A1 and I'm going to use the cube set function again. So equals cube set, which we did this before, equals cube set, this workbook data model, comma, and then slicer country sold to. So because I am grabbing the values from a cube set, and the cube set is the list of countries, but the countries are in the slicer, I have to specify the name of the slicer, but it doesn't go in double quotes. So you just start typing slicer and it pops up in autocomplete and I can select it from there. And then if I want to add a caption, remember caption is optional, then I will do that, and that could just say countries like that. Okay, so it's very, very similar to the one we did before. Stored inside A1 is behind the scenes a list of values, a list of text entries, but this time the values have come not directly from the data model, but they've come from the slicer. So it's storing all of those values in there. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to go to the stats sheet, and I'm going to go to B4, and I want to display the selected country. Now, of course, you can have more than one country selected. You can have them all selected, or you can just have like 2 or 3 selected from your slicer. So I'm going to use cube ranked member, which we looked at before. That returns an item from a specific position within the cube set. Now, slicers are a little bit different because the members of the cube set that are based on a slicer are actually the selected slicer items. It's not every item. It's only the selected ones. So I'll go to B4, as I said, and I'll put equals cube ranked member. And I'll put this workbook data model. And then I will go to the note sheet, select A1, because that is where my cube set is, comma 1. So what that comma 1 is going to do is it's going to just pick the first item from the cube set. So initially, I'm going to just use an example of where one country is selected on the slicer. So that's why I've hard coded a 1 in there. All right. Why do I get value? Why do I get value? What am I missing there? I put cube member. Sorry, my mistake. That should be cube ranked member. I've picked the wrong function. There we go. That's better. Okay. Now, you can't actually see all, but all is the first item in the cube set. So if I click Germany, it puts Germany in there. If I pick UK, it puts UK in there. If I select Germany and UK, it picks Germany. Because hard-coded in there, what it's doing is it's saying, give me the first member of the cube set that's stored in A1 on the note sheet. Okay, I will show you in a minute how you can pick, how you can populate this with multiple ones. So if I edited that formula and I changed that to a 2, it's given us UK because UK is the second one. If I just select France, we get an NA because right now there is only one item selected from the slicer. If I clear the filter, we still get an NA. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a measure. So let's go back to Power Pivot, measures, new measure, and I'm going to create another measure. I'm going to call it total revenue because this is in a different file, but it's going to be the same measure. So it's going to be the sum of the revenue. Click OK. Okay, so that's still showing us as NA. Then if I go to B5, am I okay, Ken, to go on another 5 minutes or so?
Absolutely. Use the time you need.
Yeah, great. Thanks. All right. So in here, I'm going to say equals cube value. Again, as always, this workbook data model. The next parameter I want is the actual measure itself. So that is going to be measures dot total revenue. That's the name of the measure. And then what I need to do is I need to tell it that I want it to pick up basically the criteria from B4. So it's very similar to the previous example, where the previous example had a value in B4 from the drop-down list. This time, what's going in B4 is being populated from the slicer. So it's actually the same the same code. So it's sales YTD dot country sold to dot open square brackets, close double quotes, ampersand B4. So you're basically creating a string. That's really what we're doing. Close that and enter. And then as I jar, hang on a minute, that's still set to 2, isn't it? That's my problem. So as I select a different country, it's feeding that country into there because it's the first item that's selected, and then it is calculating the total revenue for that particular country. So what do you do when more than one slicer item is selected like that? Well, it's still giving me the total revenue for Germany. All right, still picking up the total revenue for Germany. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select them all, go to notes, and in A2, I'm going to put equals cube set count, which we did before, open brackets, A1. Okay, so that's just giving us 1. But if I was to select, let's say, 3 countries, that gives us 3. So remember, when your cube set is connected to a slicer, it's showing you the number of items that have been selected from that slicer. So the cube set count is counting the number of items in the cube set that's in A1, which is being pulled in from the items that have been selected there. Then what I'm going to do is do pretty much what I did before, where I generated a sequence, and I want to generate a sequence of numbers based on what's in A2. So we just get 1, 2, 3. So if I then added a 4th selection, that goes to 4, and we get 4 numbers. And then I'll use cube ranked member again. So this is almost the same as the previous demo. It's just that it's coming from a slicer instead of coming from a drop down. Again, I want to reference the cube set that's in A1, and that needs to be absolute. And the position is coming from there, like that. Okay, so China, France, Japan, USA, China, France, Japan, USA. Then I'm going to go to B4. And I'm going to get it to give me all the countries that are selected by using a text join. So text join, I'll have a comma and a space between each item. I want to include empty cells. No, I don't. I want to ignore empty cells, sorry. And then I want to go to the note sheet, and I want to pick up all the countries from that array that starts in C1. Okay, just make this a little bit wider like that. So as you select countries, it's just going to generate which ones you've selected and combine them into a string. And what I then need to do is I then need to go back to the note sheet. This is the final bit. Go back to the note sheet, and I need to create a cube value function. And this is what's going to generate the revenue. Okay, so I want my total revenue, which is there, and I'm basically going to pick up whatever country is selected there. So that's going to be sales YTD, country sold to, dot, square brackets, close double quotes, ampersand C1. So it's going to pick up the country from there, ampersand, close double quotes, close brackets. If I then copy that down, just copy it down to the 8 of them, I'll wrap that in an if error so that we don't get a load of NAs, we get zeros. So if error, blah, 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 comma 0. And then just copy that down. And then over here, just replace that with a simple sum. So that will be just equals sum, and then those there. So now, as you select one country or multiple countries, it's going to list the countries there, and it's basically summing up those values there. Okay, that is about it. I've probably just about gone over time, or just about hit the hour mark. So I hope that's been a useful session for you. Hope you've learned something about cube functions, and maybe one or two other little bits around, along the way. So if anybody has more questions, stick them in the chat.
You do have one in the chat that I am curious to know as well here from Henry. Can you turn that last reference into a dynamic array instead of actually running the formula down manually?
This one here.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good question. If I was to put that there, do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't look like it, no. No, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, and I know there's a long technical reason from this one, but I cannot remember why it is. So, but it's a tricky piece there.
Not there, but on the sum of the stats.
Oh yeah, that part.
Oh, on there. Yeah.
Oh,
no, that's
wouldn't think so, because it's not a dynamic array that you actually have in place over here, right? So it needs to be a dynamic array because it picks up the spill area. There's no spill area from that particular cell. The question is, why doesn't C1 hash allow it to actually spill that down? And as I'm sure I've asked about this to the Excel team before, and there was some really long, technical, detailed explanation that I can't recall. It was a little bit above my pay grade as to why it would work in some places and wouldn't work in others. And this was one of those areas that was challenging. So, which isn't really helpful, but there you go.
I'll stick my camera back on now. I've finished. Okay, so I hope people have found that useful. There seem to be some nice comments in the chat, so thank you very much, everybody. All right, I will stop sharing, Ken, and let you do whatever you do at the end of the presentation.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the presentation, my usual roundup on this one is, Mike, thanks so much for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it. It's great to show off some of the cool stuff that's in here. There was one comment that sort of got tossed about, a little chat that happened back and forth at the beginning that I just wanted to address, because, and this won't surprise anybody, because you all know that have come to these meetups, I'm a great defender of Excel. When somebody says, why would you use Excel? Why wouldn't you just do Power BI if you can write DAX? And this is one of the reasons for me, right? When you look at Power BI, I find it's great for reporting side of things, but you're really bound into that rectangular structure that everything has to be served up in a virtual table, essentially, in order to be able to serve up a visual, or get it down to a single scalar to put into a card. But when you look at the ability of a cube function, you can now start reporting just pieces of that tabular data and scatter them into a format that you may need. So it gives you some great flexibility for reporting in a non-tabular format, and you don't have to write a complex DAX measure that works on every row in order to get this done. You can break it down into little pieces that you can then just apply an Excel formula to increase it by this or decrease it by that, or if that or add that or whatever. So it's just the flexibility that comes into it. So I just wanted to sort of address that in this thing, that there are two different tools that have a lot of overlap, but there are some cool things that we can do in one that we can't do in the other. So, it's really about picking the right tool for the right job. So this is just one of those cool functions that allows us to do it. So anyhow, it's my thought on that one there. So, but great demo, Mike. Really well put together. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to learn more about them. It's sort of a hidden gem in Power Pivot that a lot of people just don't know about. So, Mike, do you have any thoughts that you want to wrap up with, or do you want to share any links to your company or anything like that? I mean, you've gone out on your own now. You need clients, so it's totally on board to share. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Okay, like I will put my link in the chat. It's the Excel trainer, not spelled with two I's. Let me delete that one. I can't delete it, can I? All right, I'll put it in properly then. The Excel trainer.co.uk. Have I spelled it correctly? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, if you want to go to my website, you can contact me from there. You can get to my YouTube channel from there. So thanks for that opportunity, Ken.
Oh, very welcome. Thanks for coming and doing it. And just a reminder to everyone, I will get the video of this posted within the next 24 to 48 hours. Once it is available, it will be, you'll get a notification if you RSVP to the meetup via the meetup site, because we always post when it's available and ready to be watched. And until next time, don't forget to sign up for our next meetups. We've got Melissa DeCorte coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'll be running a meetup on some of the cool stuff you can do with Monkey Tools in about a month from now. So thanks again, Mike. And until next time, folks, we'll see you hopefully at the next one.